Welcome to our first session in our Parent Lunch and Learn series. This session is When Grief Goes to School. Transitioning back to school is a challenge for all kinds of different reasons for most kids. And for young people who are returning to school after a life-altering loss, it's a unique challenge. And so this offering from us is in response to what we've heard from parents. Most parents say to us, there's no handbook for parenting my grieving child, and they're right. But as we work with our families and work with the families who come to the Children's Grief Center, we notice that there are some common questions, some common concerns around how to support kids in school, how to share information with the school, how to advocate for your child, and also how to support your child with some very real concerns that they have about returning to school with peers on this side of loss. And so we know that grief is varied. We know there's no handbook, there's no prescription, but we hope that this session can honor all those unique pieces while giving you a really solid sense when you leave this session about some practical ways that you can support your child as they head back to school this fall, whether the loss is recent or whether it's been a few years. We sort of are covering all of those pieces. I'll introduce myself. My name is Shanna Shepard, and my co-host, who I think you can see on your screens, is Sophie Cook.
Hi,
and
everyone.
we are both counselors here at the Children's Grief Center. I'll speak for both Sophie and I, but it is a privilege and a joy, really, to be able to accompany children and their families, teens and their families, as they navigate grief. And so these sessions are sort of an extension of that work that we do. And so it's a joy to be with you for this hour that we have together. So as we go into the hour, let's just have a couple of housekeeping things. I think we're all really familiar with the Zoom world now, but just you noticed as you logged in, your mics and your cameras are off, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, you may have received the notification that this session is being recorded. And so it's for your privacy that the cameras and mics are off. And also we recognize that you may want to honor your needs in a way that you don't want everyone joining you in the space that you're in. So feel free to grab your lunch, grab a hot cup of tea or a coffee. You may even want to find some movement while you engage with the session today. So with your camera off, you're welcome to do that. For the sake of time, because this is a short session, I'm going to invite you to kind of hang on to your questions as we're going, or you can type them in the chat, and Sophie will kind of gather those up and offer them out if there's something that's really unclear as I'm going through. And then there will be, so I'm going to present for about 30 minutes on this topic, and then there will be time, 15-20 minutes at the end for kind of an open question and answer session. And so if I haven't covered some of the things that have come up for you, then that's the time. Or if you have a really specific question that you're wondering, that'll be the space. So I just want to introduce you to how we're going to have the Q&A before we get there, and then we're going to leap into our content. So if you look on your toolbar for Zoom, you're going to find the reactions button. And hopefully you guys are all finding that. I can't exactly show you that on my screen in my presentation mode, but if you find reactions button and you click on that, there will be an option to raise your hand. And so when it comes time for Q&A, that's a great way to do it. And then we can call on you. Sophie will invite you to turn on your camera and your mic, and you can share your question or maybe an insight or a learning that you've had as we've been having this conversation. You can also just type it in the chat, and Sophie and I can read it out if you don't want to turn on your mic or your camera. So you're welcome to do that. You may, depending on how savvy you are on Zoom, you may already have the view you want, but you can also change the view to, is it side-by-side share? Sophie, what's the best view for the viewers?
My impression would be side-by-side mode is off. Then you and I show up at the top, and then we've got our PowerPoint underneath.
Okay, great. Okay, so with some of those pieces out of the way, we're just going to jump in. And Sophie's going to be our sort of chat moderator and engaging you there. If you have some questions, feel free to pop them in there. She'll respond. She'll let me know if there are some questions she's gathered up that would be helpful to kind of bring back to the group before the Q&A. Okay. Let's just make sure my screen's rolling. That change over. Okay.
It did.
So just a really quick word about us, if this is the first time that you've connected with the Children's Grief Center. So the CGC, Children's Grief Center, is part of Hospice Calgary, who you may have heard of. Hospice Calgary has been providing compassionate end-of-life care and bereavement support for over 35 years in Calgary and area. And there are really kind of three components of the work there. So there's Rosedale Hospice, and there is Sage Centers Community Hospice program, and then the Children's Grief Center. So I'm not going to go all over this slide, but I just wanted you to see all the varied ways that we provide support in the community. Our commitment is to provide the right support in the right way at the right time. And that means being flexible and adaptive to the needs that families share with us. And so that's really where the Lunch and Learn came from. We have heard from parents that right now, at this time in the world, what they really need is some concrete information in a way they can access easily. You don't have to come to the center. And so I guess this is sort of one of those silver linings of some of the COVID changes, is we can join together in this way, providing support in a brief way, and hopefully in a way that feels supportive to you. Not everybody engages us for counseling or a group, and sometimes parents really just need to get in there, get some practical information on supporting their kids, and also check in, like, are my kids doing okay? This is what I'm noticing. And so that's our hope with this. That's why it's live and not just a recorded session that we're offering you. So I look forward to the Q&A. Feel free to jot down your questions and throw them in the chat as we go along. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover today. Again, it's a short session, so I'm just really going to we're just going to move through it. We're going to address the common questions that parents have asked us, and then some of the common concerns that children and teens share about returning to school. We're going to talk about the waves of grief that come at school. Sometimes they're unexpected, sometimes you can plan for them, but waves of grief that come uniquely at school, and some practical ways that you can help and support your young person. So as we start, if you don't mind, Sophie is going to throw up a poll. We'd love to hear what age group your kids are. That way, if we end up with a unanimous elementary school age, we'll kind of stay there and focus there. But so if you wouldn't mind, just take a couple of minutes. If this stresses you out when this poll comes up on the screen, just ignore it. Sophie's going to take it down in a few minutes, but just to give us a sense of who's here and what you're needing from us.
Thanks everyone for getting your answers in.
You guys are fast. Wow.
Yeah.
That's everybody.
Really
oh
yeah. All right. So it's looking like a good number of elementary school age children, teen, high school age children. We've also got a number of people joining us who are supporting children and youth who are grieving. It looks like, so yeah, a big percentage of elementary school, and then second being teen, high school age, Shanna. So to give you an idea of maybe places to focus.
Yeah, that's just a pretty even mix there, actually, looks like. Yeah. I'm gonna get rid of that. I see the poll there. Okay. We're gonna begin today just with this short story. Stories, I think, whether it's in a counseling setting or whether it's with our kids, are a really wonderful way to approach a hard topic. But they also, so they can give that safe distance to approach something really difficult. But they can also be a way to give language to normalize experiences maybe that kids are feeling or having, but don't have the words for. And so this is one of my favorite, and I share it with you here as we kind of center ourselves into what we're here for, which is how to support kids and teens in their experience of grief as they're navigating the world on this side of loss. This is Sophie's going to put it in the chat. This is a really cool a book by Angie Lucas put out by Sounds True. One of my favorite parts about it is that there's actually a video. So you can order the book, or you can also use the video if you'd like to kind of share this with your kids to open up conversation. So we'll start here.
My Big Dumb Invisible Dragon, written by Angie Lucas, illustrated by Birgitta Sif. Have you ever seen an invisible dragon? Neither had I. But one day, last May, a giant one swooped in and landed on my head, right on top of my head. It was the day Ollie's mom came to get us from Turtle Hill Park, instead of my mom. She had a funny look on her face. She opened her mouth 3 times before any words came out. I don't know if the dragon rode to the park with Ollie's mom or if he was already there hiding in the trees. All I know is I didn't see him coming, and once he was there, he would not go away. Dad and I had to get used to making dinner without Mom there. We had to get used to how quiet it was in the car without her singing along to the radio. We had to get used to movie night without her famous peanut brittle popcorn, but that big dumb dragon didn't even notice. He moved right in and made himself at home. He curled up on my chest every night when I was going to sleep. I swear he must have weighed a ton. He made it super hard to get out of bed in the morning. At school, he cast a ginormous shadow that followed me everywhere. And if you think it was easy to stand up straight with a dragon on my head, let me tell you, it wasn't. I think he's the reason some kids didn't talk to me as much anymore. Some days I ignored him. I pretend he wasn't there at all. I played hard and laughed like crazy, even louder and crazier than before, but that didn't make him leave. Other days, I got angry. You can't believe how mad I got. I yelled and shouted at him, at everyone. What did that dragon do? He put on his headphones and tuned me out. There were also days when I'd reach up and pull his big, heavy wings around me. I would curl up like a caterpillar and hide away for hours. It wasn't always so bad to have him around. Still, almost every day, I tried to make a deal with him. If you'll just get lost, I'll never say a bad word ever again, I told him. I thought maybe if he left, things could go back to the way they were. But he didn't seem to care what I wanted, not a bit. Then one day, when the sky was filled with cotton candy clouds, Ollie invited me back to the park. I made myself roll and cartwheel and race down Turtle Hill just like before. I ran so blazing fast that my hair stood straight up, like uncooked spaghetti, which made Ollie giggle. Then something happened that I wasn't expecting at all. For the first time in months, I forgot all about my dragon. When we ran out of breath, we flopped down on the grass and took turns spotting shapes on the clouds. I see a giant octopus, I said. Does that look like a chicken to you? Ollie asked. There's a pig. Or is that a bear? I asked. That one kind of looks like a dinosaur, Ollie said. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's a dragon. I don't know what that dragon saw up there in the clouds, but after that day, he started soaring even higher and staying away longer. He often disappeared during gym and recess. Sometimes he missed a whole soccer game. Once he was gone for an entire weekend, but he came back just in time for my birthday party. I tried all my tricks to make him go away. Skedaddle, vamos. But what do you think he did? He put on a rainbow-striped cone hat and stayed for the party. I finally just gave him a piece of my birthday cake. That night, as I waited for sleep, which can take a while when there's a big dumb dragon in your bed, I realized something. My dragon didn't feel as heavy as he did back when I was 6. Guess my birthday wish came a little bit true. Hey, remember when I asked if you ever seen an invisible dragon? That was a silly question. You can never see one by looking straight at it. You have to look at the person underneath.
It's one of my favorites. This session is really focused on how to support kids at school, your kids at school. And so there's not time to go into sort of all of the different developmental pieces you'll see when it comes to grief. Those are future sessions that we hope you'll join us for. But I hope that the story highlighted a lot of common things that kids experience in their grief. And then I just want to highlight them here. What we know, I'm just sort of summarizing what kids and teens need in order to begin integrating their grief story into their lives. And so again, there will be some future sessions on this, but at the top of the list here is, and it will become, I think, clear why this really does matter as your kids head back to school, but truthful, age-appropriate information about the death is a really important part of what kids are needing. I've bolded choices and a sense of control because that's been completely taken away in a death. And so we work to restore some of that sense of agency and sense of control and choice. And so that should also impact how we go about advocating for kids at school and providing support to them. So you can see some of these other pieces. We're going to hit on them later: routine and predictability, making sure there can be light moments. School can be amazing for that. Patience, acknowledgement, reassurance, validation, normalizing. We're going to talk about all of these things. I think we'll just leave it at that. But I just wanted to highlight these are the things that kids are needing, and school can be a unique place where these things, we're advocating for these things to happen, and it does happen there for a lot of kids. So I wanted to highlight those. And then before we talk specifically about school, because these things will come into play, I just wanted to highlight some of the unique features of grief in childhood and also in adolescence. Children and teens are, if I were to list the characteristics of grief, it would be just like yours as a parent. There would be the range of emotion. We could put them all up here, sadness, anger, anxiety, worry, guilt. The list could go on. But there are, I just wanted to highlight here some of the unique features that are a little bit different for kids and teens than for adults. And so one of those is doses of grief. And by that, I mean that kids move in and out of their grief. I love in the story where there are times where he says he tries to laugh even louder than he ever did before, There can be times where kids, they're sort of just balancing that need of play and fun and moving into grief, in and out, whereas adults tend to kind of go in and stay in. It doesn't mean that they're not grieving, and when you see them laughing and having a great time, and it doesn't mean that they're not being impacted in really significant ways. So kids grieve in doses, and just knowing that, holding on to that. I know that there are adults who have this, but children can especially have a vivid sense of memories or dreams. Sometimes those can be comforting and sometimes they aren't. But vivid memories, vivid dreams, as well as maybe sometimes a really vivid sense of the presence of their person. Hyperactive, so I put that on here. Of course, like I said in the beginning, grief is varied. People are unique. And so this isn't every kid, but even when you have a child who's not hyperactive, some of that energy that's there can kind of show up in those ways. So separation anxiety, you probably already know this one if you're joining this session, but for a lot of kids who've had a death in their family, especially the death of a parent, this becomes heightened, and that's totally normal. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a normal response to what they've experienced. It's challenging as a parent, though, particularly with school. And it can be challenging for the school too, to know how to support your child if they're having some school refusal, or it's really, really emotional at drop off. And so that can be and I should say that can also be there for adolescents. It just shows up a bit different than it does for kids, but a unique feature. The magical thinking, their understanding of death is still in development. Again, future sessions, we will cover those by stages, and we can kind of hash that out a little bit more, but sometimes it's there, like what that may look like is a child who is talking about their parent or a person who's sibling or someone who's died, and then they say that they're going to be at their birthday party like next month, and some pieces like that. It doesn't mean that they aren't aware of the death, but they're still integrating it based on their stage of development. And then the other piece that's really significant is the re-grieving. I think that sometimes this can be one of the hardest ones for parents, because it means that when a child has a death, their lives do become oriented to loss in some ways. And over the lifespan, as they change, as they grow, as they develop, their grief will too. And so as they have a new understanding of themselves, the world, people, their parent, their person, they may need to come back and touch their grief again and make sense of it in a new way with who they are at the time. And so just paying attention to that. So for kids or young people who come and get some counseling support for a time, they have what they need, and then they don't need us for a little while. And as they hit a new stage, they may need to come back and revisit. Sometimes we talk about grief. I talk about grief with kids like it's a puzzle. And sometimes the grief work is kind of making a picture that's a little clearer and putting together the pieces of the puzzle. Sometimes we don't have all the pieces, and we have to, kind of learn to adapt to that. And sometimes we try to shape some pieces that can fit, that can make sense. Another piece of this regrieving is that you're adding pieces to the puzzle. So the work that you're doing now with your kids, it still matters. It's the building block. It's putting together kind of that first part of the puzzle and then adding to the pieces as they grow and as they develop. Unique characteristics of adolescents in grief. So their reaction can seem self-centered. Was just talking about this with a colleague. A reminder that this isn't pathological, it's developmental. This is a normal part of being a teenager, and it fits with grief. There may be more withdrawal and isolation, and I think that's linked to the second one. I have never had a adolescent client who hasn't spoken about the changes in peer relationships and how difficult that can be. Especially, they are not the same person now. And so trying to find how you fit with people that you fit with before can be challenging. And so at times there can be some more withdrawal and isolation. And again, there's some developmental pieces of that for adolescents, but this can be really challenging. And I think grief already feels isolating in our society, right? And in our culture. And so young people can have that added pressure around peer relationships and feeling isolated. Risk taking, also a developmental piece of this age group, and sometimes that can be heightened. You can see increased risk taking. The spiritual existential questions. It's not to say that no younger kids are ever asking these, but just based on brain development, stage of life, often these will come up in really significant ways where there will be questions around spiritual beliefs that have been sustaining up to this point, or a belief structure that a family or a young person has held that doesn't seem to be aligning with their experience of loss. And then this last piece, that they may be more private in their expressions of grief. I want to offer this to you. So I said we would cover common questions that parents have. I've heard from lots of parents that it's a little bit intimidating to go to a school admin and make your requests or figure out how to navigate that conversation. And so I'm really excited to be able to bring you a short video with that conversation that I was able to have with a school administrator to answer these questions that parents are often asking us. And so I'm going to just offer that to you here. I think that's maybe the best way to cover some of these common questions that we see. Again, feel free to add questions or thoughts into the chat if you as you watch.
So definitely communication is one of the strongest things. I know that if a loved one passes away, and as an administrator, if I have to call the family right after and say, okay, what can I tell the rest of the students in the class, or what can I share, what can't I share? Those are always things that we think about the whole student body, and we think about the classroom as like a family. And so if something happens to one of our students, we care deeply, and of course the other students are going to know, and having the permission from the parents to be able to discuss these matters is really important. And so if a parent can initiate that, and we don't need all the details, we just need to know that there's been a change and that the student is experiencing loss. And yeah, so those kind of situations where there's big life change, where the student could be wondering or having questions or feeling grief, we'd appreciate to know sooner rather than later. We talk about it openly because we're a community, and we grieve together. We talk about things, and if we don't give kids the information that they need, they're going to make it up, and they're not going to understand that some kids don't know, they've never experienced it before. Sometimes they might laugh or joke it off to try to make themselves feel better. That creates conflict. So we have to let the kids know some of the behaviors and what's normal, and talk about it openly, so that kids feel that that's been addressed, and so that they can move on. So through that together, they learn how to support each other, how to take action, how to sometimes manage their own feelings of discomfort, how to talk to another student who is going through a hard time, because a lot of kids will avoid that student to avoid talking to them because they don't want to make them feel bad. And so there's so many different layers to that. And so when a parent, we don't need to know all the details, but enough to give kids the facts and to help them understand, to answer some questions, and then also to put some supports in place for the kids that will have more difficult times. I think just by having a conversation maybe with the administrator, and you don't have to talk to every single teacher that the child has, right? You can go and you can talk to one person, and that person can disseminate the information to the rest of the staff. So the lunchroom teachers, the EAs, the different teachers that your child might have, that could be all given out with one conversation. And so, in that conversation, we're not here to judge. We're not here to, we're here to find out what's the best way to support your child and support the other classmates who are supporting your child, right? And so what's the best way to move through this? And we really work on creating comfort and security through normalcy. And so often kids, when they come to school, they feel that this is their safe place, and this is what they could come to expect. And so we don't want to upset the apple cart too much. And, every time we see a child say, oh, how is your parent, or we don't want to keep them in a sad space. We want to ensure that we just understand where some behaviors or some moments of sadness, or what we could do to support the student if they need some help. So it's basically just to keep an eye on the child and to support in any way. So the details, the fine details, I don't need all the details. I just need kind of the bigger points. Oh, and it's really interesting because we can't we can't put on to other kids, we can't project onto kids how they should feel. Like I've had a lot of students that have come to school on the day or the day after they've lost a significant person in their lives. And it's because they want to maintain that sense of normalcy, but they also want to be with their support group, and that's their friends. And so when they come to school on that day, you know, we give them what they need, and we watch them, and their actions tell us basically if that's okay or not. And often what will happen, kids will come to school and then they'll take a little break for funeral arrangements or whatever that they need. But overall, it's amazing how kids want to be here. And so not projecting those feelings, not saying you should feel this way or you have to stay home, where they're more than welcome to come. So individual, and so if you need time, and if you need time as a family and you have lots of family, and they don't need to come to school during that time either. You know, there sometimes are more important things in life. I know that's not the best educator speak, but yeah, you have sometimes only this one opportunity, and so that's okay too. You know, it's whatever is working for the family, you know, and we're there to support, absolutely. Those times when parents have those deep conversations with their kids, if they think that it might be important information to understand their child better, that, you know, definitely let us know. Often there's a getting to know you, or like, and it's true, we do as a school have sometimes records in the files. Like we have a database called IRIS that we track information, but you know, it might, if it's happened a few years ago, we might not see that. And so, you know, if it's important to the student and still impacting them, or if there's a certain day or something that you'd like to give us a heads up on, please do. And if something arises and we bring it forward, that's an appropriate time as well. You know, it's, you can't think of everything all the time, and so I don't want parents to think, oh, it's the beginning of the year, I have to do this and this and this. Yeah, it doesn't have to be. You know, it's, if you think that it could impact mood, behavior, learning, let us know. Yeah. But other than that, sometimes it's as it arises, you know, and we could take a look through that lens too. That's a tough one, because they may not get what they need from that specific teacher or from that specific administrator. And so I think it's asking the questions. So if you're working with the teacher and you're not feeling like you're getting what you need, you can always go to the administrator and have a conversation with the administrator, or both the administrators, right? Together, it's often good to have those conversations. If that's not giving you what you need, I think understanding what your expectations are for your student, and what you're asking the school to do, and if that can fit within the parameters. So when you go have those conversations with admin or with the teacher, I think it's good to not only share what the student's going through and what's happening, but also what you would hope is happening. So like a possible outcome. So, you know, I would like my student to have a quiet space that they can go to reflect, because they get embarrassed when they're in class. Now they don't want to come in school because they're afraid they're going to cry in class. Or I'd like alternate activities. They may be able to offer a solution to that solution, right? So I don't have space to, or anybody to watch your child, but if your child lets me know, we can have the space in the classroom, or, you know, they might be able to come up with a different solution. So I think it's very proactive if parents have an idea of what they want from the school. If it's a connection to counseling, if it's a connection to a certain person, you know, like there's different things, but just having a sense of what that could be.
I just wanted to highlight a couple of pieces from what Colleen shared, and that is just keeping it on your radar as a parent, and on our radar as a support person for kids and teens. That sometimes it's so clear in those first few months, and sometimes where some of these things are really needed, the advocacy is needed, and some of the accommodations requested is actually a few months down the road or a year down the road, when there's sort of just some new experiences of grief that sometimes feel like they come they come unexpected or come out of the blue, but are still very much grief related, even a few years down the road. But I really appreciated her insights around, you don't have to feel like you're every September, you're going to tick off that box unless that feels right to you. You can address it as it comes up and as it's going to impact your child at school. We're going to talk a little bit more about some specific ways of doing that, and also engaging your child in that conversation, giving some of that sense of control, like we had talked about there at the beginning. And so I just wanted to highlight that. And then I wanted to say, after I've shared that with you, and I'm so appreciative of Colleen, she's an assistant principal at Chaparral School, being willing to share her experience and her wisdom on that to help guide you as you have these conversations for your child, and especially if you're encountering where they're not getting the support that you hope they would. I wanted to be sure and ask her that question. She had a great response. Having said all that, and the value of information sharing with the school so that they can support your child, but they can also support the school community. You have the right to not share any of that information if you don't want to. I love that she stressed that you don't need to share details. I think there's sometimes some confusion around that, and also some protection on the side of parents and kids. And so you and your family get to decide what is shared. I was recently a part of a consult with some school staff, and there was, a couple of thoughts kind of floating around that the classroom community and the school community didn't have enough details to make sense of the loss and to help kids integrate that and support the wider classroom. And my response to that is, you don't need any details. And the family has every right to share and to not share. And so, as we've just had that conversation about why it's helpful, that's not something that you don't have to own what's happening for the wider classroom. But we offer it just bearing in mind that they are a support for your child. And so there's some ways to navigate that information sharing that feel like they preserve your privacy and what you're needing and what your child's needing. So I love this. This is, I think, from Alan Wolfelt, the Grievers Bill of Rights. And so just a reminder that you have the right to all of these things to make this, and so does your child, to make decisions based on your own needs, not necessarily the needs of other people, to let people know what is and isn't helpful for you, to not share personal information, all of these pieces here. Just want to highlight for you, if you're having conversations with your child or your teen, they may not have language for this. They might express this, but these are the common pieces that we hear from kids about the nervousness or the worries about returning to school after a death. And so probably you're well aware of this one. At the top of the list is just answering questions. They might be just lack of skill, like unskillful questions that people ask, or they might actually be really inappropriate or awkward questions that people, or hurtful questions that get asked. And so kids are validly worried about this. What am I going to do when people ask me the questions, and what is it that I want to say? Another piece is other people having information about their loss that they didn't actually share. So this happens a lot. This is why it's really important for, as Colleen mentioned, for the school to gain permission from parents about what they're comfortable sharing, and for parents to have these open conversation with their kids about what is going to be shared and how a child would like that to happen as well. Feeling excluded and more isolated because they know this makes them different. I had a young client recently who said that she'd experienced bullying in the year previous. And so she was quite worried that now this would make her kind of stand out as another, even more as a target. And so there can be some real concerns about that. Honestly, being a downer. So there's lots of ways kids describe this to us, but like when I'm with my friends, I'm just afraid, like I'm sad and I'm going to make them sad. I'm going to kill the buzz, kill the fun. I'm just going to be a downer and people won't want me around. And I want to say that if you're a griever, then you already know this, but just a reminder that trying to talk people out of this feeling isn't very helpful. And I think the reality is that sometimes they're not wrong. Kids aren't wrong when they worry about this. As Colleen mentioned in the video there, sometimes kids don't know how to deal with their own discomfort, adults as well, their own discomfort around this topic. And so they may avoid the kid a little bit more. And so there's another benefit to having the school be a part of building a compassionate classroom around your child. And yeah, okay, so being emotional in class, I think we've highlighted that one already. Or in a test, I've heard that a lot, like as stress goes up around a test, then emotions kind of go up too, and it may come out at a time that feels really embarrassing. So they're quite worried about that. This 2 lives idea, that they kind of live this one life at school and then they have this other life at home. And so sometimes that just feels confusing and conflicting. Being treated differently by friends and teachers. And that can go both ways. So sometimes I've had lots of kids say to me, I don't want to be treated differently at all. Like, I don't want them to even like look tenderly at me. I don't want them to invite me to go to the washroom or for a walk or invite me to talk, or I don't want to look like I'm getting special favors because of my grief. So I've heard that. And then, there also can be the flip side of, hey, I think there's not enough understanding that I'm actually going through something. But I've heard this one a lot, that there's a fear about kids will notice that I'm being treated differently now by my teacher, kind of favored, and they'll resent me. And so that's a big concern. Being defined by this loss, that that you'll be the person whose dad died of cancer, or you'll be the girl whose family died in a fire. Just having that define you. And so that's a big concern. And then this last piece is more for teens, but this idea that there's a fear as the grief is showing up for them at school, impacting focus, ability to concentrate. And we really want to validate that. If you are experiencing grief yourself, you'll already know that that is a very common feature of grief. Now, some young people might dig into their schoolwork even more and just thrive and do brilliantly, but some may really struggle to concentrate, to focus, to complete work. Daydreaming, kind of zoning out in class when big emotions might be coming up, that happens quite a bit. And so for young people who are in, grade 9, 10, 11, up, those higher grades, worry about how this might impact their future, about if they get poor marks, in a grade 10 class, that it's going to kind of chart their trajectory. And if they have some ideas about what they want to do for university or college. And so there can be a lot of fear and concern around that when they start to feel that they can't focus and concentrate and do the kind of work that they did before. I want to check in with you, Sophie, really quick before we move into this really practical part about how to help, so that you walk away with some tools. And then we'll move into Q&A. So anything in the chat that I need to be aware of before we kind of move on?
Thanks for checking in, Shanna. Desiree just shared this brilliant example of how she's advocated with her children's schools to find ways that they can support her family in ways that feel good for her. And it looks like some questions might come up in the Q&A around control and choice and what that can look like in terms of connecting with schools.
Okay, good. So let's go into that. Then we'll move into the Q&A. Some of those questions might get answered as we talk here with some more practical pieces now.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll just keep buzzing through to honor our time here. So how to help. I've highlighted, and then we're going to talk about them a little more. I'm going to flesh it out, but ask your kids. I think if there's anything you take away from this session, I hope you take that away. have this conversation with your kids, invite them into decision-making about what is shared. So asking your kids, another piece around kind of the age difference is when, as parents, we think about sort of that concept that's normal for teens as this gradual release of responsibility in their life. We can also do that with their grief. And so, junior high and high school look really different. You're not in the same classroom supported by one teacher. And so for a young person to decide if they're going to share it with their peers and not a classroom, because they're really sharing it with their closest friends, and if they want teachers to know. And so that can look really different, but we do kind of release some of that decision making to them in a new way, but always having that conversation and including them, preparing them for what to expect. This is a tough one. And we're going to talk about ways to do that, but preparing them for those awkward conversations or questions or experiences. Normalize what they're going through, normalize this experience, keep rhythms and routines, because that's, create safety, predictability, comfort, and then advocate with the school. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those. This is
Shanna, I'm just gonna
Mhm.
jump in here for a moment.
Yeah.
We're almost at 12:50.
Yeah.
So just a quick time check.
Yes, I've got my time here. So
Fantastic.
good. So this might not answer some of your Q&A questions. And so this is the meaty slide. This is just highlighting that previous slide, how to ask, prepare, normalize, keep rhythms and routine, advocate with the school. So some ideas for helping prepare your kids. Typically, they might need, I consider it sort of a menu. You might offer your kids a menu of like this, about how they want to talk about the loss. How do they want to address it if it's asked of them? And so, or if they want to initiate sharing. So you want to offer, do you want to initiate? Do you just want to kind of have a plan if people are talking to you or asking questions? Would you like me to talk to your teacher about how to do this? So you might have to offer those ideas and let them think about it and choose what works for them. A really key point here is just for as parents to stay open, because a lot of times parents and kids maybe don't see this quite the same. And so staying open, even if it's not the way that you maybe wish they would handle it. I've had kids make up stories about where their parent who's died is, and they don't tell peers that they're dead. And so there's just some challenges there, but trusting their wisdom that they know how to handle it for this situation, and it won't stay this way forever. One other really big thing, practice it. Nobody loves role play, I think, right? We all have, if we have to do that in our jobs or in school or whatever, no one loves it, but it's so helpful. So I would say, talk with your child about what they want to share. It can be very simple language. You might have to, again, give that menu of things they want to say, and then practice it. And so even in session when I'm helping prepare a kid to go back to school, I might do something like, I'll be another student and I'll ask an awkward question, and I'll let them practice how they want to respond. So some of these pieces, helping them think about who's a classmate they do want to share. They don't want to share with the whole class. So here we go, normalizing their experience. I'm going to leave this here for you. These will be available, or you can screenshot this slide if that helps. Let me just briefly hit on advocating with the school before we open up the Q&A. So I think Colleen did a good job of sharing some of the ways you can do that, but I also wanted to highlight a few things that I find are really helpful. So back to that question of, should my child go to school? Like, that is a very personal decision for you and your child, but there are lots of opportunities to be creative about it. So a progressive plan. So maybe they aren't ready to go back for a whole day. And maybe they need to do mornings or afternoons. Often afternoons, they get kind of tired and the emotions do rise. And so you might do mornings for the first week, or there's just a lot of variability there. You can find what works. And also asking for accommodations, adjusted workload. You have every right to that. Your child has every right to that. Adjusted workload, alternative activities, all of those pieces. Okay, last thing I want to offer. Because I feel like I'd be remiss to not. I think there's those, we talk about grief, that it comes in waves. And so there's some of those waves we can prepare for. We can see them far off. We know they're coming. We put on our life jackets, we get ready, or we get in a lifeboat or whatever, we get ready. There are some, I think out in the ocean, they're actually called sneaker waves. And so there can be sneaker waves for kids. And so I just put a little list here. Some of these are the ones I think we'll recognize, that there are special holidays like Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays, days like that. when the season of loss, like the time of the death, when that's approaching, your body knows that, their bodies know that. But some that sometimes catch people off guard are things that a lot of people consider to be a special moment together as a community, like the Terry Fox Run, Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day is such a somber feeling in the community of the school. A lot of kids, it catches them off guard. Bell Let's Talk, if you've had a death by a suicide. School events or school routines that parents were a part of. I've had a client where her dad always helped her pick her options and helped her make decisions. And so that first time in high school where it came around where he wasn't there, that was paralyzing. So just thinking about what is the role, is the relationship of that person to your child, and where might that be missing? One other to really highlight curriculum content at school. So if they're in phys ed or they're in health and they're working on CPR and your child was present for emergency services at a death, or even is aware that that happened, some of those pieces can really catch kids off guard. Or other conversations around mental health and those kind of things. And the last one I just want to highlight is no reason at all. That it can come when it's just not expected. And so normalizing that, we're not doing anything wrong, that's grief. Okay, I know we're at our time. So this is how I wanted to end for us before we have some questions, is just this graphic to remind us that sometimes in our culture, in our community, we can think that grief grows smaller over time, but actually we grow larger around the loss. And so supporting your child or the young people you're supporting in this way is how we are helping them grow larger around the loss as they navigate it for their futures. So I feel that's where we're going to end. We're going to stop. I think Sophie do you have one last kind of feedback survey that people can give us some very, very quick input? Again, this lunch and learn is intended to be what you need. So please give us your feedback on what you've appreciated, what you need differently. And then I see the time, but we'll open it to questions. So if you have a few seconds and you want to, I think you can click all of the above. Is that right? Like you can click any that apply.
Yeah, in the first one, you can click all that apply. In the last one, it's just one. We would also invite, if your feedback extends beyond the options you're given here on this poll, please feel free to send us an email. I will put our email in the chat there and you can get connected with us that way. Your feedback is so important to us. It helps us gear these presentations and these webinars to meet where you're at, and it helps us find our content, and all feedback is welcome. So thanks everyone for taking the time. Looks like about half of you have been able to share that with us.
Yeah, okay. Just wait another minute or two if you're dying to get your feedback in there.
Yeah, we're about 75% here.
Okay.
And we'll make time.
Let's
questions.
shift.
Yeah.
Can we
totally
shift and just take, and there may have been some answers to the questions that were coming up, and I haven't seen the chat, but I'm going to pull it up now and we'll just take a few